Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back. Gerald here with your weather forecast. Hope we're all staying safe out there on this Thursday. Pretty active weather ongoing through much of Tennessee, Mississippi, Alabama right now, seeing some of those severe storms, and then also snow falling out there into sections of the Midwest. So a very dynamic system that we're currently dealing with. But luckily, it looks like we have much nicer weather in store for this weekend, although colder. We're going to talk about that, and then we're also going to touch on next week a little bit, and I'll tell you about the general pattern that we are looking at. But more importantly, I'm going to break down this current system that is ongoing and impacting a lot of us, and I'll go ahead and break that down region by region for you in today's video. So since we do have a lot to talk about, let's go ahead and get into it. Don't want to take up too much of your time here. So taking a look out there at radar right now, this is that system as a whole. Most of this kind of northern component that you see here is snow and or sleet falling through much of the Midwest. And then on the southern end, this is where we have those severe storms stretching from Kentucky all the way down to the Gulf Coast. As we discussed yesterday, we have some flash flood warnings ongoing here into sections of Tennessee and Kentucky. And then as of right now, at the time I'm recording this, and it is about 4 o'clock, we have one tornado warning ongoing here, right pretty much at where Mississippi, Alabama, and Tennessee meet. And this storm's been, it's been firing up on and off rotation. So by the time you're watching this, it should be tracking through sections of Tennessee, likely south of the Nashville area. But other than that, pretty quiet in terms of widespread severe weather. We do have some severe thunderstorm warnings firing up here across Mississippi, and I do expect these storms to continue to be able to kind of interact with this environment as they push into Alabama here in the next couple of hours, before eventually weakening as the sun begins to set and we lose some of that instability. So looking at satellite right now, you can see these severe storms. It looks like a classic severe storm day across Dixie Alley here, and you see that with these very bright colors indicating those cold cloud tops, which just means that those clouds are getting super high up in the atmosphere, and that indicates strong storms. So that's easy to see here on satellite. And this cold front in general that has this much cooler, drier air behind it out west that will help cause for a much nicer weekend for most of us in the east. So taking a look at those hazards right now, up in the north we have those winter weather advisories, winter storm warnings, and then tornado watch, as well as those current severe thunderstorm warnings and tornado warnings here into the deep south, from again Nashville down to Birmingham, back towards Jackson, Meridian, these areas of the southeast. I do expect again this threat to die off as we get into tonight. So eastern Tennessee, from Johnson City, Knoxville, out into the Carolinas, don't expect really much severe weather at all, and I really wouldn't expect severe weather to get any further east than this current tornado watch into the overnight. But again, nonetheless, still active weather, and I should mention, kind of sandwiched between this winter weather and severe weather, we do have a lot of flooding ongoing, and we have flash flood watches up for sections of Kentucky, southern Ohio, into West Virginia. So giving you a quick overview of this system, do a quick rundown here. Again, snow on the north side, severe storms on the south side. As we push this into later tonight, that snow continues into the Midwest, pushing into Michigan, and then those storms turn into just plain old likely heavy rain as we get past midnight tonight. And then once we get into tomorrow morning's rush hour, we've got widespread rain here in the mid-Atlantic, and then some snow and ice up here into New England that we're going to touch on as well, before eventually going into tomorrow evening, into Friday night, and especially Saturday. We are all clear here across really the entire lower 48. You'll see looks really nice. So we'll talk more about this weekend and next week at the end of this video, but for now let's go ahead and touch on what we have left to deal with this system. So I'm going to start by talking about the snow here. I'm going to try to go kind of quickly through this so we can spend a bit more time talking about that severe weather threat. But right now we do have that snow setting up shop here from Chicago northbound, especially the northern suburbs of Chicago, seeing some of that snow. Really a wintry mix we've kind of been dealing with in Chicago throughout the day. But this band of snow is going to continue to push off into Michigan as we get into tonight, and you can see as we time this out, this is going into about midnight here. I think most of that snow should just be left over Michigan and then pushing into New England. So by the time we get into tomorrow morning, we should be pretty clear, except for I do expect some snow squalls to come here off the Great Lakes. So down here into a place like Gary, Indiana, could see some snow out of that tomorrow. But in terms of widespread snow, much nicer day tomorrow. And taking a look at those totals, most of this that you see back here is really already fallen. So most of the snow left to accumulate is up here into Michigan, where I still think 3 to 5 inches is pretty likely, with isolated spots getting more 5 to 8 totals here right into kind of the heart of Michigan there. So that's the snow in the Midwest. Taking a look at that winter weather in New England as well as that rain, I expect that to really get going into late tonight, early tomorrow morning. We're going to have quite a wintry mess of a whole lot of everything really falling here into upstate New York, sections of Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine. And you'll see that as we push this ahead into time, this is really going to be a mixed bag of wintry weather here in upstate New York, with sleet, freezing rain, and even some snow falling tomorrow morning. And then as we get into tomorrow afternoon, it looks like mainly snow here into northern Maine, but through northern Vermont, northern New Hampshire, again, it's going to be a wintry mess, and especially in the higher elevations. I think the lower elevations really look like mainly rain with this system. And then that continues into tomorrow afternoon with that wintry mix getting into most of Maine. Maine looks to be kind of split in half here between snow in the north and then that wintry mix in the south. So you'll watch for that tomorrow. But then by the time we get into tomorrow evening, this looks to mainly clear out with some back-end snow potentially in Maine before much nicer weather going into Saturday morning and the rest of the weekend. So looking at the snow here, really most of this looks to stay up into Canada here. As you can see, that kind of comes in from Michigan and then stays up here into the extreme southern bits of Canada here and into northern Maine. But there will be some snow kind of mixed in here into sections of New York. But honestly, I think a lot of this is really sleet that this model is picking up on. So I wouldn't expect any kind of drastic totals. The biggest thing here, I think, is going to be that ice, a pretty big swath of about 1/10 of an inch of ice, I think, here in this general area, and especially in those higher elevations of Vermont and New York here, could see maybe up to 2/10, 1/4 of an inch of ice. So that'll be the bigger deal here in New England compared to the snow that we're seeing back towards the Midwest. So now talking about that severe weather, I'll go ahead and move this ahead to what we're kind of looking at by the time you're probably watching this. We're going to have this line of storms and even some more renegade cells excuse me, in front of that and pushing through Alabama this evening. And that's where we could have that severe weather threat here where those storms could tap into those ingredients to produce some tornadoes. And then, as we get into the overnight, that continues. But I think once these storms start pushing into eastern Tennessee, Georgia here, once we get more into the 9 o'clock to midnight hour, these storms should really begin to weaken, and we should just be dealing with good old-fashioned rain. And that continues through the overnight tonight before eventually getting into tomorrow morning. We could be dealing with some pretty widespread rain here from the Gulf Coast up I-85 through Atlanta, GSP, Charlotte, seeing some rain tomorrow morning, I think. And then that will continue to push through and begin to weaken as we get into tomorrow afternoon, with much nicer weather into tomorrow evening and this weekend. Taking a look here at the kind of Ohio River Valley area, again, most of the severe storms have been kind of confined to Tennessee southbound today. So into Kentucky and Ohio, I said this in yesterday's video even, I thought the Storm Prediction Center was a bit bullish on bringing that threat all the way up here. And today that looks to have kind of not really materialized up there, and most of that severe weather has been down to the south. And that has helped to keep those severe storms further to the south. So as we go into tonight, we got storms rolling through the Nashville area. Then again, I expect this to push east towards Knoxville, Johnson City, Bristol, kind of the Tri-Cities area. Although it should mainly be good old-fashioned rain by then. Can't rule out some thunder and lightning, but I really don't expect any severe weather after the sun goes down here into eastern Tennessee, up into eastern Kentucky, and into West Virginia. And again, just some good old-fashioned rain tomorrow morning for the Appalachian chain from Alabama all the way up through, again, the Tri-Cities, up into West Virginia, Western Virginia, and then into sections of New England as well before that clears out. And we do likely get some snow squalls and some lake effect snow tomorrow afternoon here through especially the higher terrains of West Virginia, I think, into southeastern Kentucky. And again, this model is being pretty bullish on this with pretty widespread snow squalls. I think this might be a little overdone, but nonetheless, you get the idea that some back-end snow showers tomorrow afternoon before that finally dies down into tomorrow evening. So just taking a look at this tornado potential and what we have left to deal with, you can see this is going to continue into tonight, but the later we get, the more this system kind of begins to weaken and we lose those ingredients. So for northern Alabama, Tennessee, I think we really only have a couple hours left of this severe weather threat before eventually we get into tonight, and that threat looks to kind of get more confined to the Gulf Coast where we have enough of that instability left over before eventually into the overnight that threat really completely dies down. Can't rule out maybe a stray tornado warning into the Florida Panhandle into the overnight and into tomorrow, but really not expecting any kind of widespread severe weather out of that after the next couple of hours or so. So I do want to time this out for the Mid-Atlantic and give you a bit more of a look at just that rain in general, because that's really what we're going to be dealing with here, as well as that northwest flow on the backside. But again, going into this evening, that's when that rain really picks up here, and then into tomorrow morning's rush hour, right here through DC, all the way down kind of towards the Richmond area, Charlottesville, and then down towards Greensboro, the kind of Asheville area, Boone, North Carolina, and then even into Charlotte. And we will watch to see if we have a line of this that can stay kind of convected tomorrow morning. And what I mean by that is see if there's still some kind of lightning or thunder with this in the morning time. Wouldn't be too surprised to see that, but not expecting severe weather. So we'll watch that through the Piedmont of the Carolinas and even Virginia tomorrow morning from, we'll say, Greenville, Spartanburg, up I-85 through Charlotte and kind of up towards the Raleigh area. We'll definitely watch for that. But nonetheless, this really clears out by the time we get into tomorrow evening, and then we worry about that northwest flow on the back side. And that, again, will continue through tomorrow afternoon before much nicer conditions tomorrow evening and a nice weekend ahead. So looking at those snow totals here, out of this, I think the main winners will be up here into the higher terrains of West Virginia. Maybe some snow down here into the Smokies, although I wouldn't be too optimistic on anything over really an inch or two. And then, some places here in between. Wow, I did not mean to bring the pen that thick, sorry. But up here into the Tennessee and Ohio River valleys, so there'll be isolated spots that pick up a quick inch of snow out of these snow squalls, but of course that's just kind of hard to predict the exact locations. So, anywhere in this kind of circled area here could see a surprise inch or two of snow tomorrow. So now talking about this weekend and next week, again, this is that system that clears out, and as we get into Saturday afternoon, I mean, there's really not going to be anything going on across the entire lower 48. It looks really nice throughout the entire country this weekend before eventually we get back into next week, and that's when things really appear to kind of pick back up. So maybe early next week, a quick clipper system moves through the Midwest. That doesn't look to be anything too crazy, and then I think maybe we get another kind of quick system that moves through the southeast as well early next week. But the big thing that we're going to talk about next week is this kind of, I don't want to call it a double barrel low, but it kind of is a double barrel low system. It looks like towards the middle part of next week where we may have two separate areas of low pressure that sets up, and this really could cause quite the winter storm for a lot of us here in the northern plains, and maybe even quite the ice storm. So this is something I think is going to impact millions of Americans, especially in the Midwest, the northern plains, and potentially even into New England. Could be dealing with quite a storm system next week. And I mean, just look at how expansive this is. This thing could be going from the Dakotas all the way to Boston at the same time. So that's something we're really going to want to pay attention to after we get through the severe weather that we are currently dealing with before I think once again next weekend we get back to a generally colder pattern. So we've kind of had this pattern where it's been really warm and spring-like during the week with storms and then super cold on the weekends. That's just kind of the way it sets up because the way that the weather works, you get these kind of patterns that lock up, and then storm systems, whenever they come in around, they usually have the same kind of gap between them, and that is just set up to where we've had more wintry weekends and more spring-like weeks. So it's just kind of the way February has gone so far, and that looks to continue. Taking a quick look at the temperatures, again, this weekend, I do expect a cool down going into Saturday before, by the time we get back into Monday, those spring-like temperatures rebound once again into the east before going potentially into the middle of next week. We get some kind of boundary to set up here, and we'll have super warm spring-like temperatures. I'll change the color there so we can see this a little bit better. Super warm spring-like temperatures here, and then cold Arctic air to the north, and then as we often see, whatever forms kind of in between here in terms of low pressure that rides through this, that is going to cause quite the storm system to worry about the middle of next week before, again, I think that cold air tries to push back into the next weekend. So not this weekend, but next weekend, although this weekend as well will be pretty cool. So that's what we've got right now. A lot going on. February has not disappointed in terms of active weather, although it may have disappointed in terms of winter weather so far. I think that may change next week for some of us with quite the storm system. But we still have to get through today. We have to get through these current severe storms that we're dealing with in the southeast. So make sure that you're staying weather aware with that. And with all that said, hope you all have a great rest of your day. Stay safe out there, and I will see you all tomorrow.